Welcome to My Brooklyn Heights. I'm Andrew Nodell, and today's guest is David Steven Cohen. He's a lyricist, a writer, and a Brooklyn Heights resident. And David, thank you so much for joining us.
That's my pleasure.
So tell me about your career, because I was looking at your resume. It doesn't take much to find out that you've been involved in some really interesting shows over the years on television and beyond. So take me through that.
Well, Brooklyn Heights was kind of pivotal in my career because I sort of got my first job in LA around the time we moved from Park Slope to Brooklyn Heights. So we were living in Brooklyn Heights for about 6 months before we moved to LA, but we kept our apartment here because we probably wanted to figure out a way not to save the money we were making. So let's have a home on both coasts, because what could be cheaper?
Well, it's kind of glamorous, isn't it?
It is. Oh, yes, it is. And also we very much wanted to stay here. Kind of went out to LA kicking and screaming, and I'm almost ashamed to say that because it's a dream for everybody. And I wanted to go to LA. Never particularly wanted to work in sitcoms, but my first job in the big leagues was produced by Steve Martin.
I mean,
and
that's not bad, right?
It was a comedy, and no. And how do you say no? Whatever it is. Would you like to work with Steve Martin? Yes. Landscaping? What? What does he need? Does he need his art collection rehung? I'll do it.
Yeah. I'll wash the dishes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then we found an apartment in the St. George that we loved, and it was spectacular. It had a view over the rooftops of Manhattan.
Yeah.
It was really enchanting. The building held so much history to it. You felt the ghosts of bygone eras going around, because it was such a grand hotel.
Well, do you still feel those ghosts at St. George?
Yeah, I look for them. I seek them for inspiration. The whole neighborhood is filled with ghosts. I wrote a song about it called Ghosts of Brooklyn Heights, which is basically a waking dream where you run into centuries worth of the denizens of this area who created great art and pop culture and great thinkers and composers who lived in this neighborhood, as Truman Capote said, by choice.
By choice. I live here by choice.
And I love saying, telling people, I live around the corner from where Breakfast at Tiffany's was written.
I know, it's not pretty neat.
Yeah.
Well, there is so much. I walk the streets of Brooklyn Heights, and I think of all of the stories that existed before our time, and what the streets must have looked like 100, 200 years ago. And in a lot of cases, they probably look pretty similar, which is a wonderful thing about the neighborhood. What do you love most about it here, and what kept you here all these years?
At first, it was a great place to live as we were going back and forth between LA and New York a lot. We kept the apartment here, and it was just the right amount of space, and it wasn't a brownstone where you felt like you were living in too much space just for the couple of weeks you were in New York. In LA, we were renting houses, and we were thinking of moving there, frankly, when the '94 Northridge quake hit, and that gave us the overwhelming fear to finally get the courage to move back to New York, which is what we wanted to do. I was doing very well in LA, and I don't think I was running away from success as much as I was running away from earthquakes and my own fears of being in unknown territory. I really grew to love LA.
Yeah, but you're a Brooklyn boy.
I am a Brooklyn boy.
Born and raised.
And there are so many Brooklyn societies out there, and you gravitate to Brooklyn. You meet people, you're talking to them, and you realize, oh, you grew up in the same neighborhood. Well, you and I just discovered.
Well, we just discovered that you grew up with the mother of my college roommate.
Yeah,
essentially.
Yeah,
which is wild.
And his dad was my first drummer.
It's wild.
It's not surprising, and it's just funny that it came up right away because you said the name Noskov, and it's an uncommon name. Brooklyn Heights has a rich history of creation and progressive thought. I mean, George Washington planned a retreat here that helped him win the war. That's how far back it goes, and I'm sure farther than that. When I think about how much electricity
Oh
How
my
much
gosh.
creative electricity has flown through the streets and the air, and Richard Wright lived here.
Well, there must be that electricity must energize you as a creative
Yeah,
of the neighborhood, the energy of the neighborhood.
one of my favorite things to do, and I have been doing it because our roof is closed, but is to sit up on our roof, 27th floor of our building, which used to be a nightclub, with a grand view of Brooklyn and Manhattan, 27 stories above Brooklyn Heights, and tremendously inspiring to have the city all to yourself. I'd love to go up there, and I would go up there at midnight.
Yeah.
And I would write a script, whatever I was working on at the time, and I would just work till dawn. And people doing Tai Chi would come up. Somebody would be getting high, so, and I would just notice it, like little bits of life forming around me, and the birds were coming out, and I just felt like I had all the energy in New York to myself.
Yeah.
When I read about the denizens of February House, who were very, the cutting edge of culture at the time, and a lot of them didn't deign to go to the St. George because it was too high class for them. They preferred the rough and tumble bars on Sand Street.
Sand Street.
Yeah, they would go down there where people would get beat up, and you'd have all sorts of, they were artists. They didn't want.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea too that that Brooklyn Heights, as historic as it is, has been an area for creatives and for people who may have been kind of marginalized. I mean, I see a sign on one of the trash cans on Montague Street that says the first gay bar in New York was opened on Montague Street, 1950. I just think that's kind of a cool history.
Wow.
Yeah. There were a lot of creative minds here, and you're adding to that community. Yeah.
The great joy, the royalties I get, the residuals I get from these projects are responses from fans and the coolest things I've ever done. But one of the things I've gotten that's been tremendous in terms of feedback from Arthur, certainly, but from Courage Cowardly Dog, which is about a scared little dog who had to deal with all these horrific creatures who came to visit the farm, basically to attack Muriel, the beloved, see no evil owner of Courage, delightful woman, and her bastard husband, the farmer. Perfect little, John Dilworth created this perfect little family that had a constant source of conflict and comedy. And what I hear back from fans of the show, who are now your age and thereabouts, is that they watch it as children. They had their own problems, some of them worse than others. Abusive families, abusive parents, broken families, tragic stories, and some just the difficulties of childhood. And they say, I would watch Courage, and if he could get through this and live up to his name and get over his fears, so could I.
That's a hell of a legacy for you.
And I hear that, and I think, sure, I'd like a summer home paid for by the residuals, but that just makes me shiver in a way that residuals couldn't.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Again, it's not either or. It's just I make my peace.
Absolutely.
But it's a wonderful thing, and nothing. When I was writing the show, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I just hope I wasn't scaring kids too much, and now I see I was scaring them just the right amount.
That's excellent. That's a beautiful legacy. You've had such diversity in your career, from Courage Cowardly Dog, Pee-wee's Playhouse. You mentioned you wrote an opera, and tell me about how that journey through those different projects has shaped you. And you had mentioned that that agents had a hard time selling you because you're so diverse in terms of what your creative output is.
Yeah, this business, entertainment, wants you to do one thing and one thing well. They want you to be the person they go to for this thing. You're the guy who can come in after the script's been written and bring the funny. But what they don't allow for is you sort of have to have different names almost and different identities. I wrote an article about it. In fact, when I was working on Dr. Seuss, and this very dramatic opera about Lilith, Adam's wife before Eve. There wasn't a joke within miles of that. and I was invited by a classical composer to perform it, to write it. I'd never written a libretto before for an opera, so I didn't know what I was doing, really. So I'm doing Seuss by day and that by night. And I made the mistake of letting the Seuss people know I was working on the opera, and the opera people know I was working on Seuss, because I thought it was funny, and it was a really good, to answer your question, really good sort of cross-fertilization I heard them as very similar kind of characters. I started writing this Lilith verse in Seuss verse, just for fun. Storytelling is storytelling, and that was very dark and very twisted, but so is Seuss in a way. It can be dark and twisted. But it's all storytelling, and that's whether it was an episode of TV's Playhouse, which had its own frenetic mode of storytelling. You're dealing with characters through an arc, and you want to lean on the characters, whether it's a comedy, a cartoon, a live-action sitcom, an opera, a musical, or a single song. I like to live through the characters in there, and this experience is very much the same in any of these disciplines, in any of these areas of creative pursuit. So some of my favorite artists have different talents. Writers I've met, whose scripts I've responded to, it turns out they're musicians. They've got some kind of rhythm going that informs the writing, especially in animation when so much is on the beat, so much of it is orchestrated. And so much music that we grew up listening to, especially classical music, came out of Bugs Bunny cartoons and such.
It's incredible, I know. But one thing I've learned, especially working on this project, is that the community here in Brooklyn Heights has so many stories to tell, and so many of us are multi-talented, and we should celebrate that. And I so appreciate you joining us today, David. Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's really my pleasure, and I think that what you're doing is magnificent, because there is so much creative power to be exercised, not exercised and gotten rid of, but to be manifest in this neighborhood and to be appreciated,
and preserved.
And preserved, absolutely, but also be appreciated by the people walking around. And you get yourself locked in your little day-to-day, and whether you're a creative person or you're not a creative person, although I think everybody is to an extent, you have to appreciate, you have to breathe and sort of let the universe speak to you. And the universe of Brooklyn Heights is just filled with creative power and progressive thought.
Well, let's go get inspired then.
All right.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
These cobblestone streets are a theater that stars a most curious cast. Come walk with me, ghosts of the future, and dance with the ghosts of the past.